Welcome back to another live question period with your host, David Krayden. Thank you for joining me today. Hope we get some good numbers. We really appreciate everybody who shows up and participates in this question. I know it can be hard sometimes listening to question period. Believe me, and I share that frustration. But it's necessary to know what's going on because so much of the media schedule, so much of the media is determined by what happens with the static question period. That might not be good. It might not be fair. It means during the summer, sometimes there are days and weeks when the media pretends there's nothing going on, when of course there's lots going on. But that's why we cover question period. Yes, it's theater. It's complete theater. And wanted to say that at the onset today because I worked, as I've said many times, on the Hill for many years, too many years. And the government's already got the questions that the opposition is going to ask, and especially the official opposition. The lead-off questions are the ones they pay particular notice of because these are the ones that the media is inevitably going to report on the most. So they're ready and waiting, not with answers, but with what in the public relations world is called bridging. In other words, I'm glad you asked that question, but I'd rather talk about this. And that is indicative of what happens every day in question period. They will not answer the question. They will say, "Thank you for asking that question, but let me talk about this other issue." And they might have a brief transition to it. The liberals increasingly don't even bother with a transition from, yes, that's an interesting question, to here's what I want to talk about. There's no real transition, segue between these two things. And so you'll see a question about cars being stolen, and the liberal government automatically will jump to climate change or white supremacy or any of the other bugaboos that this Trudeau government is obsessed with. So I find that fascinating. They're breaking all of the rules, even though those rules were pathetic to begin with, because the government never wants to answer questions directly, yes or no, or even in a 2 or 3 sentence way. They want to sell their agenda no matter what, even if that's farcical to do so. So I wanted to talk about a few things. I've got no slides or videos to show today. I think we had enough of that yesterday. But I was speaking this morning to Clayton Morse of Redacted. And I'll be on today. I know a lot of my viewers also watch Redacted, and I'll be on Redacted today talking about Bill C-63, the online harms bill, and the fact that Elon Musk has noticed the online harms bill because now we know the online harms bill will be retroactive. In other words, I'm in a position now. I've been writing for mainstream media and other publications for at least 25 years. Now, do I go back over all of my material for the past 2.5 decades to ensure it's fireproof, to ensure it's not going to be something the liberal government or this new online censorship czar or the human rights tribunal aren't going to say, "Oh, that particular word was inappropriate. That particular line or sentence might be construed as being hateful." I don't know. These are the things. But what's the purpose of this? To scare the hell out of people, obviously. So they spend most of their time wondering about what they said 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even last year, and what they're going to say today. This is why the Trudeau government is totalitarian. It's not quite there yet, but it's going in that direction because it's all about making you worried about what you say and now even what you think. Elon Musk has noticed. He says this is a terrible affront to free speech in Canada. Yeah, no kidding. It's going to mean the end of free speech in Canada. This is the most draconian, most outrageous anti-free speech bill in the world, at least in a country that's so-called democratic. It's worse than anything that's existing in Scotland now or in the UK as a total, or in the United States or in Australia, or in the European Union for that matter. This is the worst law that is potentially going to put people in jail or in house arrest for what they think, and anything they say that can be construed as hateful. And I tell you, one man's hateful is another man's criticism. One woman's criticism is another woman's hatred. So that's the danger. That those are the pitfalls of this very odious bill, and that's why we have to keep fighting it. Now, there's another aspect to this I wanted to point out to you, and Elon Musk needs to know this, and I think we need to get Elon Musk very involved in the criticism and the pushback against Trudeau's Online Harms Act, because one of the things, the stipulations in this bill that a lot of people aren't talking about at all, including people who are experts in the legalities of this, is that it establishes fines for offenses under the act for social media platforms. Yeah, I'm not kidding. The max, and I'm reading right from the bill here, the maximum penalty for an operator, meaning a social media platform that commits an offense. And what's the offense? Posting anything that can be construed as hateful. On conviction on indictment, a fine not more than 8% of the operator's gross global revenue, or $25 million, whichever is greater. So a minimum of $25 million. On summary conviction, a fine of not more than 7% of the operator's gross global revenue, or $20 million, whichever is greater. So I think I actually said whichever is less on the on my redacted segment. I should have corrected that. It's just whatever is greater. But no matter, because nobody is talking about this aspect of the bill. And people, we need to talk about this, because what is this going to mean? It's going to mean social media platforms are going to say, to hell with Canada, because we don't want the litigation. We don't want the judicial problems. We don't need the legal problems. We don't need the threats of this kind of revenue extortion. And that's what this is. This is extortion, just like what Trudeau's already done to social media platforms with Bill C-18. It's extortion. Pay us money, pay the legacy media money for the privilege of, of using their material, even though it's really the reverse. The media lusts after social media putting their material on Facebook, on Meta, on X, because it boosts the sales, it boosts the distribution, it boosts the ad revenue. They can charge more for ads when millions more people see the stories. This is common sense, but it's beyond Justin Trudeau. Or is it? Or is this all about getting rid of social media in Canada, getting rid of independent operators like myself, getting rid of new media, like the Post Millennial, like Rebel News, like True North, and others. And going back to what Trudeau sees as his halcyon days, these golden days where there was only CBC, CTV, and Global News on television, and a couple of national newspapers, and some dailies in all the national capitals, and of course, those weekly newspapers in the communities that nobody really takes very seriously. But that's what Trudeau wants to go back to. Those are the great old days for him. And that is what he is looking after. So I think we'll go to question period now. We're getting very close to the intro. Thanks for listening, and let's enjoy this today. And please share this broadcast, share this station, like it, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and let's fight this Online Harms Act together. And thank you for being a part of this today. And let's boost those numbers as high as we can. Tell your friends, tell your family to become a part of this live at QP with David Krayden. Thank you so much for being here. And we're going to go to question period right now. Why do these people think all women are ardent supporters of abortion. What a stupid assumption to make, and they know it's a stupid assumption. Listen to this woman make these ridiculous comments that somehow women can't be pro-life too. I would say if not a majority of women are pro-life, a huge proportion of women are pro-life. This is not some sort of man's issue to be pro-life. This is how the people on the block, they're far left, they're woke, and they don't understand what they're talking about. Anyway, I'll shut up as soon as Pierre gets up. By the way, I think I put one of our commenters on timeout yesterday by accident. If you're the person I did that to, my apologies. It was unintentional, and I don't do that to anybody unless you're using language that's really offensive, that's racist, or is something that's beyond the pale. But just, I think we're ready to start here. No. Oh, I see. Yeah, she got some irate. She got some heckling for that stupid statement. What an incredibly dense block MP. Of course, all the blockheads are dense to begin with, but
difficulty hearing the. I am having difficulty hearing the honourable member from Peterborough, Northumberland, Peterborough South. I'll invite the honourable member to start from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal leadership race, well, it's underway. Front-runner Mark Carney is first out of the gate. He was in the Senate, confirming there and pledging that he would maintain the Prime Minister's punishing carbon tax. When asked about fiscal responsibility, well, there's no policies he's going to change. Mark Carney will continue the Liberal legacy of higher taxes, more spending, and poorer Canadians. Canadians, well, we just don't need another random Liberal making life more expensive. So whether it's carbon tax Carney or the current Prime Minister, Canadians continue to suffer. The more these Liberals spend, the worse things get. In contrast, a common sense Conservative will axe the tax, build the home, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Let's bring it home!
Well, Philip always puts his whole body into his statements and
The honourable member
questions.
from Pickering Uxbridge.
Mr. Speaker, when Roe v. Wade was overturned in the United States, Conservative MPs cheered and vowed to do the same here in Canada. We see everyday stories of the life-threatening health implications American women are facing. Last week, the leader of the opposition admitted that he will unilaterally override the charter for policies that Conservatives want. Conservative MPs
that's not one he wants, believe me.
House telling women across this country that they believe the decisions of women's health care should be decided by Conservative politicians. Today, while Conservative MPs are marching on the front lawn to roll back women's rights, we will stand up to fight. We will fight for women to control our own bodies, fight to protect women's charter rights, and we will fight to protect women's freedoms to make our own healthcare decisions. Who in this place will stand here now and fight with
Abortion's
us?
not in the charter, you idiot. And second of all, what about COVID mandates? Were you letting people control their bodies? Were you letting women control their bodies then? All you want to do is control our minds. That's what liberal control is about. And the speaker shut the sound off, not me. No. Are we going to get on to questions soon, buddy? Or are you going to go endlessly onto your statement? This guy has no sense of time. Finally.
The honourable member from Regina, Capel.
No Polly.
9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, Canadians are getting poorer. His inflationary deficits are pushing up inflation and interest rates. That's because when the Prime Minister goes into the markets and borrows billions and billions to fund his spending spree, that bids up the interest rates for everyone else. And a new report from the Bank of Canada is shocking. Average mortgage payments will rise by more than 20% in the next couple of years. Where the heck are Canadian families supposed to come up with an extra few $100s just to pay higher mortgage payments for the homes they already own?
Last members, just to be very conscious of the language that they use. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker,
Oh, no.
given that it is my first opportunity to speak in the House today, I want to speak about a very grave threat to Canadians. Last week, the Conservative leader said he is going to ignore our charter rights.
That's right.
This week, a Conservative MP stood up in this House and said he's opposed to a woman's right to choose. And now Conservative MPs are outside attacking a woman's right to choose. So now we know the truth. They're going to attack our charter rights. They're going to attack the rights of every woman in Canada.
What did I have to do with the question? What did I tell you?
Thank you, colleagues.
They don't even bridge anymore.
From Regina Capella, last member from New Brunswick Southwest, who is a respected member in
Oh,
the
no,
South.
what an absolutely
Please,
deplorable
hold
one.
back until he has his voice. The honourable member from Regina Capella.
None of that is true, Mr. Speaker. She's just desperate to distract from her own record. And she's trying to console Canadians by saying that everything's okay because she hasn't quite maxed out the national credit card just yet. But all of that spending and borrowing is having an impact.
Yes, she has.
In fact, Desjardins Financial has concluded that output per capita fell in every province last year, which is the broadest base standard of living decline in Canadian history, other than the pandemic, costing Canadian families $4,200 a month.
No, she'll
Will
talk. You
somebody
think
over
she'll
there
talk
please
about
cut the
abortion
national
again?
credit card before more Canadians go bankrupt?
The funny thing is, Pierre Poilievre has no desire to advance pro-life issues and to ban abortion. And the Liberals know that, but it's just horrible fear-mongering.
Another respected member of the House to please only take the floor.
He's said that on many occasions. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of shouting while I was speaking from the other side of the House.
I wonder
and
why.
That is because they are afraid that Canadians are starting to understand their real plan.
Hey,
Canadians have seen they hang out with white supremacists and
Look at
don't
her busting
disavow
out of
them.
that dress.
Canadians have
It's
seen
incredible.
They are getting ready
Arrogance.
to tear up the Charter of Rights. And now we know the first right
Who's tearing up the Charter of Rights? You are.
Right to choose, just like the far right has done south of the border. But we will not let them.
When this idiot throws bank accounts for no reason, she violated the Charter of Rights.
Sampling over free speech rights by trying to control the internet and control what Canadians can see and post online. But Mr. Speaker,
Right.
for random
Finally,
Liberals
mention it.
hoping that when the outgoing Prime Minister finally leaves, a new Liberal leader will rescue them, they're about to be sorely disappointed. Mark Carbon Tax Carney continued his Liberal leadership campaign in the Senate yesterday, where he pushed the same radical agenda, endorsed the current Prime Minister's carbon tax, and couldn't come up with even a penny to cut in wasteful spending. If Mark Carbon Tax Carney won't do it, the current Prime Minister won't do it, will somebody over there axe the tax and fix the budget?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really delighted to hear the Conservative House Leader talk about the rights of Canadians and how important they are. I'm a woman, I'm a mother, and let me tell you what the most fundamental right of every woman and girl in Canada is.
Abortion is the fundamental. That's the fundamental.
Your own body. It is time for the
Did you hear this?
to stand up and clearly say, are they going to defend a woman's right to choose? Because what we're hearing from them is they want to end it.
All right. Did you hear that, folks? Christian Freeland just said the most fundamental right for women is abortion.
Mr. Speaker, today
What planet does this woman live on? She is so contemptible.
Cooperation between the opposition
So
and
contemptible.
government. Thanks to the member for Mégantic.
That's going up
The
tonight.
minister understands that July 1st is moving day in Quebec. Thanks to us, the minister now knows that. And I might be smiling, but it's no smiling, no laughing matter, because July 1st is the worst day of the year, especially for those working with those struggling. And this year, people are going to be paying more than ever for rent. And what is the government going to do to help them?
So according to Christian Freeland, freedom of speech doesn't matter. It's just abortion.
I'm very pleased that a member from Quebec is asking that question today. Obviously, I'm not a Quebecer, but I admire the women and feminists of Quebec. Quebecers always understand the importance of the right of each woman in Canada, their right to choice. Do the Quebec Conservatives reaffirm the right of each and every woman in
How did this
Canada?
question
The
period
honourable
become all
member.
about abortion? Because
All women in
Freeland
Quebec and
is so
all
stupid and
women
so
in
dense,
Canada,
she
all
wants to
men
make it
in
that way.
Canada, and all men in Quebec are suffering from this government's inflationary policy. That's what's affecting Canadians. The banks, the mortgages and rents are going to increase because of this government's inflationary spending. Is there anyone from this government who can clearly explain how these 500 billions in spending, the 500 billion in spending, how is that going to reduce inflation? The Right Honourable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy that the member opposite raised the question of Canadians' rights and the
You're
rights
not
of
happy.
Quebecers as well. What affects every woman in Canada and in Quebec is our right to control our own body.
There she goes again.
This week, a Conservative
Incredible.
member here in this place said that he was against that. There are Conservative members on the Hill outside today saying the opposite. What does the member from Quebec have to say about this? The honourable member for La Prairie. Coming back to the serious insults from the Liberal member about defending the French language, this morning we were treated to his forced apology to the witnesses he intimidated. Too little, too late. Now that we know exactly what he thinks of Quebecers who are concerned about the decline of French, he has no business being president of the APF, no business traveling the world in princely style to speak on Quebecers' behalf. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and ask him to step down? He no longer has the confidence of Quebecers. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to begin by thanking the bloc members, the member who spoke a few minutes ago about the importance of women's rights in Canada. She was very eloquent, and we support what she said. We understand,
The woman is
we
completely insane.
agree that there has been a
Must have been
decline
too many
of French all
vaccines.
across Canada and in Quebec and in the other provinces as well.
She's
And
completely
that's
lost
why
any
our government
grasp on reality,
has been supporting
if she
French
ever
all
had one.
across the country. The honourable member for La Prairie. The
Totally
Prime
self-obsessed.
Minister added insult to injury. He says the Bloc is going after this member because, in his opinion, we don't like Francophones outside Quebec. The fact that we don't take insults lying down to him is an attack on official language minorities. In other words,
That's all the
in his view,
blockheads can
Quebecers
talk
who
about.
refuse to be called extremists and so on are Francophobes. I've got news for him from many Quebecers. You can't walk all over us. The member has no business representing us in the Francophonie. Will the Prime Minister show him the door? The Honourable Deputy
Like
Prime
anybody
Minister and Minister of
cares
Finance.
except a few blockheads about this.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not a Quebecer and I'm not a Francophone. But I do truly want to reassure my colleague opposite that for our government, French all across the country is very important.
Oh,
and we
yes. Look at
understand
Melanie
that there's
is
been a
nodding
decline
in
of French
agreement,
in
in
Quebec and all
concurrence.
across the country. And that's why our government is supporting Francophones in Quebec and Francophones everywhere else in the country. And that's why we are investing in French in Canada and the world.
You know, Chrystia
Honourable
Freeland
member
is
for
not
Rosemont
capable of
Petit
running an
Patrie.
H&R
Mr.
block shop.
Speaker, renters are having a hard time making ends meet. Groceries are expensive. Rents are expensive. People are struggling with credit card debt, and it's affecting their mental health. Meanwhile, the Liberals and the Conservatives are protecting the profits of the grocery CEOs. Why? Maybe it's because they got $150,000 in donations from Loblaws, Metro, and Empire. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Oh, yes, it's all
And if
it's
you
a
don't have
Loblaws conspiracy.
$150,000 to attend those parties, oh well, good luck filling your fridge with food. Hey, Liberals,
Well, if you
How's
guys
the
are so
lifestyle
concerned,
of
why
the
don't you
wealth
start
and
voting
how
against
are you liking
your
the
friends in
lifestyles
the
of the
Liberal
wealth,
government?
the rich
You
and
know?
famous? The Honorable Deputy Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we, like other members in this House, we understand that we have to invest today in order to support Canadians, and that's what we're doing. We also understand that to do this responsibly, fiscally, we need to ask the wealthy to pay their fair share. And that's what we're doing. We understand that we need more competition in the grocery industry, and we're doing that too.
The honourable member from Cowichan Malahat Langford.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are taking food off the table and asking themselves why the government isn't lowering food prices. Well, maybe it's because the Liberals and Conservatives have gotten $150,000 from the families and CEOs of Loblaw, Metro, and Empire. Both parties know exactly who pays their
What does
bills.
this moron think? The
Canadians
government's
deserve a
supposed to sell
government that's
food?
going to put them before big grocery CEOs. Why are the Liberals favoring CEO profits over lowering costs for Canadians?
Then vote against this government if you're so impassioned against it.
Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government absolutely understands that now is the time to invest in Canada and Canadians, to invest in housing, to invest in affordability, to invest in economic growth. And we know we have to do it in a fiscally responsible way, which is why we are asking those at the very top.
I guess you don't know that one too
A
well.
little bit more by increasing the capital gains inclusion rate. When it comes to the grocery sector, Mr. Speaker, we know that Canada needs more competition, and that's why we've brought in a once-in-a-generation change to Canada's competition law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, Canada has turned into a nation of renters. After spending $89 billion on a photo op slush fund for housing, rents and mortgages doubled. The dream of home ownership for an entire generation is dead. Canadians are stretched because of higher taxes and higher rent, like the carbon tax scam that increased, making it harder for Canadians to pay for rent and food. Was it fair to increase the carbon tax scam 23% when 70% of Canadians told them not to?
Well, of course not, but they still think 8 out of 10 Canadians getting money back.
Mr. Speaker, if my honourable colleague is concerned about tax increases, I suggest he talk to the leader of his own party who's proposing to increase taxes on new apartment construction by putting the GST back on apartment rentals in this country. Mr. Speaker, their plan is to raise taxes on home construction. Their plan is to cut funding for the communities they're going to build homes. He has actively promised in the media that he views the role of the government not to participate in housing. On our side of the House, we're going to make the investments necessary to solve the housing crisis. I hope the Conservatives will join us.
The honourable member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
We won't take any lessons from the worst immigration and housing minister in Canadian history.
Yes.
And now we have Mark Carbon Tax Carney preaching the same radical agenda in his Liberal leadership like this Prime Minister. He won't denounce the Liberal carbon tax and commit to cutting 1 penny of Liberal waste. Whether it's Carney or this Prime Minister, the inflation driving deficits will continue. And just like the carbon tax scam, none of them are worth the cost. Will any other Liberal leadership candidate stand up today, show some common sense, and declare they'll finally axe the tax?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, it's understandable why Conservatives want to throw up some smokescreens. It's been a very bad couple of weeks to be a Conservative.
Really? Why is that, Stevie?
White extremists. Then their leader says we're going to have an a la carte charter of rights where we're going to take away your rights on a whim. And now, Mr. Speaker, we have a female candidate for a Conservative nomination alleging criminal content in the conduct of her nomination, identity fraud, false information. When will they stand up for law and order, Mr. Speaker?
Is that drunk?
The honourable member from York Simcoe.
McKinnon is such a clown.
This NDP Liberal government has made life even more unaffordable for Canadians by raising the wacko carbon tax by 23%.
Yeah.
Gas, groceries, and
Yeah,
everything
he was
else
stoned.
is more and more.
It's actually one of the rare times that I can't hear the own.
Maybe you muted it, Fergie boy.
If I could please ask members. If I could please ask
Yes, the last 4 years have affected Canadians' mental health, Cindy Mick. Yes, you are so right. I think we've all experienced that.
Start from the top.
Yes,
Thank you,
from the top.
Mr. Speaker. This NDP Liberal government has made life even more unaffordable for Canadians by raising the wacko carbon tax by 23%. Gas, groceries, and everything else is making life more and more expensive, especially for those living in rural and small town communities where driving further for longer is just a fact of life. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed Canadians would be better off without the carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister stand today and admit to Canadians that he's just not worth the cost?
And he's not there to say anything.
Natural resources and energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It causes me some disappointment to see an honourable colleague with whom I actually get along very well spouting such misinformation in the House. At the end of the day, the price on pollution is an effective way to fight climate change, but it is also a way to actually help with affordability. The PBO says it, 300 economists across the country say it. It is a way in which to fight climate change, but also to make life more affordable for Canadians. It is good climate policy. It is good economic policy for Canada.
It's bad climate policy. It's bad economic
Well,
policy.
we know that is disinformation, Mr. Speaker. Canadians looking at their bank account know that the carbon tax hurts. After all, this government continues to classify small town and rural communities as urban, making them ineligible for the rural rebate and forcing them to pay more in carbon taxes to this out-of-touch Prime Minister. So, are they punishing rural Canadians and dividing them based on geography? Or does the Liberals actually think that Pefferlaw is downtown Toronto?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage
I know we all love York Simcoe and all the communities they're in. But I will ask members.
This joker should have resigned a week ago.
And so we can listen to the answer for the
Because it hasn't been a bad week for Conservatives. It's been a bad year for
I would encourage
Liberals.
my honourable colleague to actually read Bill C-59, which doubles the rural top-up. I would encourage him to actually read the letter from 300 economists across the country that actually say that people, 8 out of 10 Canadians, get more money back. Rather than simply axing the facts, he should do his homework. There you go.
You don't do any homework. You just make it up as you go along every day, every time you just stand up and open your big
Mr.
mouth.
Speaker, since 2015, the public service has grown by 110,000 public servants. And despite this,
It's outrageous.
a lot of money is going to external consultants. Doesn't make sense. A vote on
No,
the
it doesn't
budget
make
isn't
sense.
about more public servants. That comes through appropriations. And the bloc voted for $500 billion in budget appropriations. Will the Prime Minister stop using consultants and instead
Did you know
rely
that Trudeau
on
has
the
hired more
expertise of
public
his many
servants
public servants?
than any other
The
prime
Honourable
minister in history?
I'd like
He's
to thank
he's
the
hired
member for
twice
his
as
question.
many
I think
as
everyone
any other
here
prime
can
minister in
thank
history.
the excellent work of public servants. They're among the best
get
in the
off it.
world. And you've
Don't-
seen not only that in the last budget, we drew up a plan for growth and
Yeah, they're doing a
investment in
great job for
families,
Liberals.
a
Yeah.
plan for investing in the future of this country. But the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister also presented a plan for spending. We will always be very strict and serious with public spending, and we will always thank those who work in our public service. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, that was exactly what my question was all about. We have 110,000 new public servants hired, but they're still paying tons of consultants millions of dollars. So the question is simple. Can we stop paying $21 million a year for consultants and instead use these new public servants or not? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives never miss an opportunity to obfuscate, to threaten, and even to propose vicious cuts to our public service.
Oh, it's vicious, vicious.
Clearly, the government is taking care of business. We're helping seniors. We're helping out with childcare, with dental care, with school food programs. It takes people to administer
All the
that.
Liberals are doing is
And those
doing
are
their
the same
business.
people the Conservatives are proposing to ravage, lay off, and cut.
Oh yeah, we need
I would
twice as many
invite the
public
member for Portneuf
servants
Jacques to wait
as
his
any other
turn.
country. This is,
The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, we're not the only ones worried about a merger between CBC and Radio-Canada. Yesterday, the National Assembly voted unanimously in favor of a motion calling on the public broadcaster to protect the independence of French language services and to consolidate that, consolidate the independence, not bring CBC and Radio-Canada closer together, talking about bringing them closer together like Catherine Tate is doing.
They're going to be
it's
defunded.
really about subjecting Radio-Canada to the CBC's vision, and that won't work. It even led to the resignation of Michel Bissonnette. How does the minister intend to protect Radio-Canada's independence from the CBC? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. In order to protect Radio-Canada and the CBC, the only way to do that is to support the CBC and Radio-Canada. That's what we're going to do on this side. Whereas on the other side, the Conservatives just want to cut CBC. My question for the Bloc is, will the Bloc stand with us in supporting CBC and Radio-Canada, or are they going to align with the Conservatives?
We have got to defund this.
Shampoo.
This Hydra.
I don't think there's any intelligent person who thinks the Bloc stands with the Conservatives on this file. The CBC CEO made it very clear in her committee appearance, if the Conservatives cut the CBC, it'll cause major harm to Francophone communities and even to Radio-Canada in Quebec.
You're dreaming.
She confirmed that the two are connected. Obviously, we don't want cuts to the CBC. The Bloc is in favor of a strong public broadcaster. That's not up for debate. But the minister has to present her modernization plan.
Turn the CBC into housing.
A watertight barrier to prevent Radio-Canada from falling victim to potential cuts at CBC.
A waste of space the blockheads are. Nothing to say.
Having a strong public broadcaster in this country is what this side of the House is going to do, what our government has done and will continue to do. The minister is working actively on ensuring that there is a plan forward for the CBC. But what is really important, Mr. Speaker, is that this side of the House, we believe in a CBC, in a Radio-Canada that is independent, that is powerful, that gives Canadians from coast to coast to coast a voice, not what the Conservatives want to do, which is simply say they will gut it or worse, shut it. Hear, hear.
Shut it.
The honourable member for Drummond.
Nobody really cares
hand,
about
the
CBC
CEO, Catherine
or
Tate,
Radio-Canada.
assures us that programming and management will not be affected by a merger between CBC and Radio-Canada. But on the other hand, we understand that everything's already been brought together except programming and management. Her plan for rapprochement is to harmonize sectors and find solutions together. Well, finding solutions together just doesn't work. That would mean CBC management imposing its vision on Radio-Canada. Why is the minister refusing to protect Radio-Canada's independence from CBC's English-speaking management? The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Oh, the time they waste.
It is critical to have a public
broadcaster
here in Canada to promote French from coast to coast, promote minority communities like in Edmonton, Peace River,
Sign any checks lately, Randy?
French is important to Canadians, and the public broadcaster is there to promote that and to allow us to communicate from coast to coast in French.
Disgraceful, man.
Member from Prince George, Peace River, Northern
Just makes you want to throw up every time he gets up in the house.
Northern Canadians are going hungry, and it's getting worse because of the carbon tax. In 2018, 57% of Nunavut families lived with food insecurity versus the national average of 12.7%. That number now is a whopping 69% and is amongst the worst in the developed world. Almost 70% of Nunavummiut are going hungry every single day. This PM knows the carbon tax is making Northerners go hungry. Why doesn't he just axe the carbon tax?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Northern Affairs.
Well, because it's helping everybody.
Speaker,
Yeah.
The member opposite has a lot of nerve. For the last
Who the hell is
years,
this?
He and his government have voted against every
every initiative to help middle-class families.
Who is this guy?
When we brought in $10 a day daycare, he voted
Minister of
against
Northern
it.
Affairs. He
When
gets
we
up
brought
like
in
twice a
dental
year,
care
this
for
guy.
kids, which had served 55,000 children in his province, he voted against it.
Wow.
When we introduced the Canada Child Benefit, he voted against it. He and his team should be embarrassed.
Well, you people never, nothing embarrasses you people.
If it takes nerve to stand up for the people of Nunavut, I'll do that every single day. It's getting worse on your watch, Minister in Nunavut, and you know it not better. I visited a grocery store in Iqaluit a few weeks ago. A can of Campbell's chicken noodle soup is over $6. A small can of tuna is over $8. Macintosh apples are $3 each, and a liter bottle of ketchup is over $13. The people of Nunavut are going hungry while this minister hikes his carbon tax. Why won't he simply axe the tax?
The Minister for Northern Development.
It looks so good for it.
Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago in Nunavut, I announced $143 million of new funding for Nutrition North. He voted against
Wow.
it. The Conservatives on the other side voted against it. In this budget, we have $23 million for Nutrition North, $101 million for the Harvester Support Grant, community foods programs. Mr. Speaker, I want to know if
Yeah,
they're
who the hell are they?
or they're going to support it.
Huh.
I don't know.
The honourable member from Cypress Hills, Grassland.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister, over 2 million Canadians are using a food bank every single month. The CEO of Food Banks Canada says that food banks are becoming unsustainable as more food banks are closing their doors because they are out of food. Yet the Prime Minister is determined as ever to drive up the cost of food as he refuses to listen to the millions of Canadians who want to axe his extreme tax. If he won't listen to us, why won't he at least listen to Food Banks Canada's CEO, or maybe the millions of Canadians who are demanding that he lower the price of food by axing his extreme carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Round and round we go.
Thank you. I am very proud to be
It's
part
the
of a
immortal
government
genocide.
that believes that every child should have access to food while at school, and that's why we announced
What do I
our
always
national
say?
school food program.
I'll have a scotch
ensuring that
instead.
an additional 400,000 kids have access to food while at school. I don't understand why the Conservatives would oppose such a measure. How would this be controversial, Mr. Speaker? Getting food into children's bellies. Children deserve to learn on a full stomach, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, reproductive rights are under attack, including by Conservatives who voted against free contraceptives, have pushed backdoor legislation, and tabled petitions attempting to violate abortion rights. But the Liberals are no better, Mr. Speaker. They failed to uphold access to abortion care, including in New Brunswick, where there is not a single abortion clinic. When will the government enforce the Canada Health Act and protect the right to access a safe abortion?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you to my friend from across the way. I agree we need to protect abortion rights in this country, and I saw her this morning with the people on Parliament Hill who are fighting for choice, who are fighting against the people who are there to take our rights away. I agree, there's more to do. It's not perfect yet.
Well, of course you all agree. That's why you're all on the same side.
Committed to it.
The honourable member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
If you have to negotiate for dignity, dignity is lost. That is what we heard
Killing
today
babies
at Canada's
is evil.
first ever Air Accessibility
Totally
Summit.
correct, Rick.
Forcing people to drag themselves
These
off
idiots
of planes or
can't
to be
see
taken
that
out on
far.
food carts is what's happening under the Liberals. Today, the minister said he could intervene, but he prefers to leave it up to big CEOs, or as he called it, the guys. That hasn't worked for the last 20 years.
Who called it the
Why
guys?
won't the Liberal minister make sure people with disabilities are treated with dignity?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, this morning my colleague and I were
Boy, this is somebody who should never be treated with too much dignity, because he lacks any dignity.
Representing other people that were there for a frank and open discussions. And we also asked the airline companies, the airports, CATSA, CBC, all of them. Why? Because we have to find solutions, Mr. Speakers. What we've witnessed in the past cannot happen anymore. We need concrete solutions. That's what we're working on. The Conservatives have just closed their eyes. They did nothing in the past. We will do better, much better, all of us together.
It's amazing someone that half-assed and that half-witted could ever occupy a seat in the House of Commons. But,
rights across the world are under assault, and we're seeing the same American tactics used by anti-choice advocates in the United States leaking into Canada and into this parliament. Can the Deputy Prime Minister speak to the women, the girls, and all
she already
who care
has
about
ad
them in this
nauseum.
country, and assure them that their federal government and assure them what their federal government is doing to stand up for their bodies and for their rights.
Oh, good. You got it out. Good job.
I'd like to thank
You
my
read
colleague
your
for the
script.
really important question. Last week, the
And for the
Conservative
6th time,
leader
I'd like to answer
bragged
this, Mr.
that he
Speaker.
believes in an a la carte charter of rights. And
A la
this
carte
week,
charter of
the
rights.
Conservatives revealed which is the first right they want to abolish. First, a Conservative MP stood up in this House and said he wants to abolish a woman's right to choose. And then today, Conservative MPs are
yes, and
standing
that's-
outside saying the same thing. The hard right in the U.S. has abolished a woman's right to choose in many states. We will not let them do that in Canada.
The honourable member from...
Don't worry, Pierre Polly, I won't be doing it anytime soon.
Mr. Speaker, after
So,
9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. BC families have suffered under the Liberals' wacko legalization of deadly hard drugs like crack, cocaine, heroin, and meth. This wacko hard drug experiment should be ended, not expanded to Toronto or Montreal or anywhere else. Conservatives have a motion to end the legalization of deadly hard drugs, ensure the government denies any active or further applications, and redirect money to treatment and recovery. Will the minister support the Conservative motion to end this government's radical failed drug policy experiment?
no, watch them blame Stephen Harper for this.
Health and addictions.
I think we need to take a moment to recognize why this issue is so important for every family that has lost a loved one to this tragic overdose crisis from an illegal toxic drug supply. People are dying alone from fentanyl, Mr. Speaker. We need policies that work. We need to meet communities where they are, and we need to understand that this is public health, Mr. Speaker. They continue to want to criminalize family members rather than getting them harm reduction, prevention, and treatment. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to saving lives and getting people health care.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, according to the most recent data, since the NDP Liberal Prime Minister took office 9 years ago, sadly, opioid overdose deaths across Canada increased 166%. And in BC, overdose deaths are now the leading cause of death for youth aged 10 to 18.
No
Addiction
wonder.
doctors came out saying legalized drugs are being diverted to youth. And unbelievably today, the Minister for Children refused to answer if she's standing up for children against her government's wacko drug policies. Conservatives are calling to end taxpayer-funded narcotics, which are being diverted to our children. Will the Minister for Children stand up for children and vote for our Conservative motion?
And they think it's safe if the government provides the
The honourable
drugs.
Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, the
These
member
people are
across the way
brain
seems
dead.
to not want to recognize that in provinces like Alberta, where they cut back on a comprehensive continuum of care, including harm reduction, people are dying at astronomical rates.
Oh, higher than BC?
Mr.
What a
Speaker, the
stupid
member well
comment to
knows
make.
that. We are committed to a full continuum of care to help those who need health care. Not criminalize them, not force them into treatment, but get them the help that they need. Shame.
Does that make any sense? How are they going to get the help that they need?
The honourable
No.
member from Oxford.
After 9 years, this
Can't
Prime Minister
think
is
her way
not
out of a paper
crime,
bag,
chaos,
that woman.
drugs, and disorder.
She's a
Thanks to
czar
his
of
wacko
drugs in this
drug
country.
policies that have legalized
Or the
hard drugs
czarina?
like crack, meth, and heroin. We are now seeing 22 Canadians die every single day from drug overdose. And this Prime Minister has even legalized open drug use in our parks, in our playgrounds, and in our schools. Will this Prime Minister show some compassion support our motion to ban hard drugs and support treatment so we can bring our loved ones home drug-free.
No, the Liberals don't want that. No, no. They want people to get the help they need, but that doesn't mean treatment.
To me that across the way they continue to mislead Canadians. Addressing the overdose crisis and the tragic deaths that we are seeing from illegal fentanyl in our streets needs harm reduction, needs prevention, it needs treatment and law enforcement. Mr. Speaker, we work collaboratively with every jurisdiction to provide health care. Why do they continue to think it's okay to criminalize loved ones who need help?
Just incredible how brain dead that woman is.
After 9 years of this Prime Minister's wacko policies, overdoses have increased 166%.
Yes, let's get back to basics here. Wacko policies.
Cause of death for kids in BC is opioids. The Vancouver police told Parliament the Liberals' safe supply is ending up on the black market, which is then sold to children, creating a new generation of addicts. The Minister of Children said earlier today that kids dying of opioids is not her problem. So whose problem is it? And who is going to protect the children and end the legalization of fentanyl, meth, and crack?
Good one, Michelle.
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Mr. Speaker, it's all of our grief. That's what it is. It's every single parent in this country who has lost a child. That's what it's about, Mr. Speaker. It's about the person who's on the street today hoping they're going to make it to tomorrow, and that their parents far away from them are also hoping, Mr. Speaker, that they'll make it to tomorrow. That's why we work with scientists and doctors, Mr. Speaker, because we are
It's unfortunate you're going to make it till tomorrow to bring more unhappiness to Canadians, Patty. What a load of BS.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. There's no worker shortage in the public service, Mr. Speaker. Its ranks have swelled by 109,000 since the Liberals came to power. That's an increase of 42%, and yet more and more consultants are being hired too. More employees, more consultants. But
well, this guy's he may be a blockhead, but he's right about this.
Passport or get your immigration file processed. The only thing that's increasing is the government's interference in Quebec's areas of jurisdiction. Instead of spending taxpayers' money and interfering in Quebec, can the government just do its job and make sure the public service does its too?
The government is basically incompetent.
During the honourable member's question, there was a conversation between both sides of the House. I'm going to invite members, if they do want to have a conversation, there are many tools which you can use, especially the young pages here, if you want to pass a note. But please, do not speak over it, because it is difficult for people to hear the question, and there was an important question that needs to be asked.
Down again.
Leader du gouvernement. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we stand up for a strong public service, and we believe in the mission of a strong government.
An overfunded public service.
Canadians to ensure that we have programs to help our seniors,
a bloated
to help our children,
public service,
to supervise approvals of pharmaceuticals. So the Conservatives want to axe the public service, and the Bloc Québécois doesn't believe in the federal state. So we're the only choice.
We're the only choice for hell. Well,
encore une fois. Once again, I would urge the member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis to take the discussion outside, please.
Hey, yeah, take it outside.
I would urge you not to hold discussions here in the chamber while questions are being put. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Immigration is meeting his counterparts tomorrow, and there are many demands. Quebec is calling for a redistribution of asylum seekers, a decrease in temporary immigration, and the approval of candidates by Quebec, French language training for federal programs, and $1 billion to cover Quebec's integration costs of asylum seekers. And if Quebec doesn't get any answers to its demands, it has promised a referendum. Will tomorrow the minister give answers to these demands, or will he be voting no in the upcoming Quebec referendum, immigration referendum. The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is a fine person, but he is not invited to my meeting tomorrow. Obviously, we will be working with our provincial and territorial partners to act responsibly for temporary workers and asylum seekers. So he'll have to hold his breath a little bit longer. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. After 9 years of this Prime Minister's, Quebec is headed for the worst moving day crisis in its history. This PM's inflationary spending has doubled rent costs and forced citizens, like the lady we heard about in the papers, to live in their minivans. In Quebec, everyone knows that July 1st is going to be catastrophic, but the minister confirmed this morning that he knows nothing about this. Can the Prime Minister tell us how many Quebecers are going to be living in the streets on July 1st because of his minister's ignorance? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is talking about the Minister of Housing, and he's wondering about how many. And we know that the Conservative leader was the housing minister in a former government and created 6 housing units. This is well known. 6 affordable housing units.
Well known amongst the 6 of you in the front bench.
Housing created compared to 8,000 that have been created in Quebec City. Unfortunately, the Conservative leader is calling Quebecers incompetent. The Honourable Member. How many houses has the Housing Minister's Housing Accelerator Fund built in Quebec for Quebecers on July 1st? 0. 0. 0. July 1st is coming up. And after 9 years of this Prime Minister's failures, after billions of
everybody moves in Quebec on July the 1st.
The minister cannot tell Quebecers how many houses are going to be ready for July 1st. The crisis is serious. People are considering suicide because they have no homes. Will the Prime Minister finally admit that he has failed and finally build houses instead of building bureaucracy in order to house Quebecers?
I don't know why all Quebec MPs can only talk about Quebecers.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague puts an excellent question. How many houses that were built
apparently
by
6
the
more than you guys
$1.8 billion that the Canadian government has created? 8,000, Mr. Speaker. We are very pleased to say so publicly. Unfortunately, that's a pretty bad comparison given the 6 affordable housing units that were created by the former Prime Minister of Housing, currently the Conservative leader, and that's across the whole country. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Bloc Liberal government, yes, Bloc Liberal, because the Bloc voted for $500 billion of budget money.
Don't forget the
to be
NDP.
used on inflationary spending that has increased the price of everything. Housing, interest rates, groceries,
those numbers
everything is more expensive, even voting for the Bloc. When will this Prime Minister stop his wasteful spending so that Quebecers can finally live in houses instead of living in their vehicles? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, the people who are watching us at home must have had burning ears because now we're talking about Bloc Liberals. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? On this side of the House, we know that we can't build houses with slogans. You can't grow an economy with bad advertising as we see on the other side. We can't build the future by asking questions. We build a country by investing, and that is what we did by investing in families, by investing in housing, by investing in economic growth. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a 21st century country. We should be proud of that. The Honourable Member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, our sisters across the border no longer have safe access to abortion. And that thing could come here. Simone de Beauvoir said that whether it be a political or economic crisis, why does it take these crises to bring forward the rights of women? because we are never sure what is going to happen. So can the honourable member would say guarantee that the Liberals will always protect women's rights and freedoms? The honourable minister. Throughout the world, Canada is synonym of promises and freedom. When I returned to Chile, I realized that you have no rights if you're pregnant. For the second time, Canada saved me by allowing
reading
me
her
to
script from the
have a
from the
legal
green
and safe
binder.
abortion for a future that I had chosen at that time and today. For me, as for so many women, this Canadian freedom
none of them have
becomes so
any
meaningful.
principles
Why are the
besides
Conservatives
staying in power.
attacking the freedom for women to choose?
What a fraud. Oh, fraudsters. They'll clap for anything.
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
The Liberal employment minister is the latest Liberal caught in an ethical scandal. He was secretly working the back door and being paid for lobbying his own government through numbered companies. Now, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, the Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost or the corruption of his employment minister. He tried to mislead Canadians when he appeared at committee before about how much he was paid for his secret lobbying, but he's being
most
hauled
corrupt
before committee
government
again
history.
and is going to have to tell the truth. How much was the minister paid?
The honourable government
He's pretending it was for services rendered years earlier. Can't stand up yourself, cue ball.
Including the ones that member would never repeat outside this House of Commons. But this bad couple of weeks for the Conservative Party, no surprise, they want to distract. You know, Diagolon, white extremists.
Oh, get off of your Diagolon. Can you even spell it, you half-wit?
No answers and just slogans on housing, on childcare, on so many issues, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative Party smoke screens from a very, very bad couple of weeks, Mr. Speaker.
He keeps talking about these bad couple of... Did we miss something?
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands.
Every time you stand up, it's a bad moment for you.
Liberals would beg for a week like this Conservative Party just had. They can look at fundraising numbers, they can look at polling numbers, and of course they can look at newspapers and see that another one of their ministers is caught in an ethical scandal. Like this Prime Minister who got caught breaking the law. Like this public safety minister who got caught breaking the law and then tried to appoint his sister-in-law to be the ethics commissioner. These Liberals can't seem to help themselves. The employment minister was illegally lobbying, cashing checks while he put $110 million of taxpayer money out the door. Will they support an RCMP investigation?
That's exactly what we need.
I'm going to ask honourable members, please, to hold back on their statements until we can have an answer. The honourable government House Leader.
The Campaign Life Coalition publishes a list of Conservative MPs who they deem anti-choice, anti-LGBT enough to endorse in the election. Well, guess what? The member from Leeds Grenville has a green light, Mr. Speaker.
That's right.
And that makes him one of 80 Conservative MPs who would deny women the right to choose in this country, who would chop up the Charter of Rights into an a la carte menu. When will the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker, get up, turn around, and say we're not putting abortion rights back on the table in this House?
It's not in the Constitution or the Charter of Rights, you idiot. But he knows that. This is just pathetic fear-mongering. Because he knows there's no support in the Conservative Party or from Pierre Poilievre for following through in any of this. Because Liberals don't want you to have an opinion that's different from theirs. And it's always projection. You know, that's... How do you think we knew what the Soviets were up to during the Cold War? because they always did. They always said,
so he should have
accused the Americans of doing what they were doing, and that's what the Liberals do.
To pay for him to be guarded. According to the Toronto Sun, his security was changed from medium to minimum security.
More about that later.
And he received permission to be temporarily absent from jail. This person is reportedly under court order not to be in the presence of children on release. Why was a sexual offender left unsupervised at a hospital, and they seem to think it's funny? Why won't they answer this?
Well, they think it's very funny. Give it to him.
Colleagues?
Oh,
Colleagues.
we're hearing a bit of the heckling for a change. Somebody must have smuggled a microphone in.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend doesn't serve to reassure Canadians when he exaggerates and distorts a series of elements that he knows, Mr. Speaker, are misleading. What he does know is we have a rigorous correctional service system where offenders are placed in the appropriate, secure federal penitentiaries based on an assessment done by professional public servants. The most important criteria is, of course, the safety of the public. We will always support public safety by ensuring that dangerous offenders are kept in the appropriate, secure federal prisons.
The Honourable Member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, around the world we are seeing the rights of women and girls, including sexual and
There's another one.
health,
There's another softball lob to Christie if she's still there.
for rights and freedoms, where women have
No,
control
you're not.
over
You're
their
not
own
proud of the
futures,
rights and freedoms.
over their own body. It is their human right. At the same time, we also know that we cannot take this for granted, especially when the rise of anti-abortion rhetoric and threatening promises by the Conservatives. Can the Minister of Foreign Affairs reaffirm our government's commitment to Canada's leadership, both at home and abroad, when it comes to advancing?
The Honourable Member has gone over time.
No, they have not mentioned the WHO agreement today, Colleen. They're all in on this one together.
At the end of question period, but all members will understand, of course, that sometimes when the speaker is in conversation with honourable members, it's difficult.
But I am going to try to get Leslie Lewis on the show. See, he really gives a damn about this issue.
Speaker, to all women in
So.
this House, to all women in this country, to all women in the world, this government will forever be there to support your
No,
right
you're not going to be there forever for anybody. You're going to be gone back to your travel agency, back to a job you can understand, back to a function that's more in keeping with your mentality and your intelligence. Because you're way, way past your ability right now.
satisfy their far-right base. On this side of the House, we will always be there to support women and women's right to choose.
Yeah. You're not supporting women. You're supporting an agenda.
So the latest reports show that emissions from big oil and gas are up
Oh,
yet
God.
again. Kill Supreme.
Look at this old.
And now
This is
Imperial
the
Oil
old
is
fart
announcing a
wants
massive
to
increase in
ban
production thanks to this
advertising for oil and gas.
$34 billion
What a
freebie
joke!
known as the TMX pipeline. So that'll be 900,000 barrels a day of unrefined bitumen emissions, threatening
Good.
the coastal
Keep it up.
indigenous communities.
Keep it
But
coming.
The government's going to go one step further and exclude greenhouse
Like the
gas
fort in your
emissions from
backyard.
environmental assessments. So will the environment minister just admit that his promise at COP26 for an emissions cap was just a publicity
Oh, here
stunt?
is Gilbo. Here is he wearing his pink jacket today? I don't think
The
so.
Honourable
No.
Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable colleague for his
There he
question.
is.
I would remind him that
The Saturday Night
the National
Fever
Inventory
Extra.
Report
He's
came
there.
out, and it shows that since before pandemic,
He's
our
ready to
emissions have
boogie.
gone down 44 million tons, Mr. Speaker. So the largest decrease in the last 25 years. It's the equivalent of removing from our road.
Yeah, 13 million cars. Yes, that's what you want to do.
Vehicles. Our plan is
So we
working,
can't
but
drive
I will
anywhere.
agree
We
with him.
can't go anywhere
There's more
without
we
your
need to do
supervision.
to
Yeah.
fight climate change in this country. If only the Conservative Party of Canada could understand that.
Well, they understand you're a moron. Anybody who listens to you for more than 5 minutes gets that point.
Mr. Speaker, protesters against Israel and the war with Hamas have set up an illegal encampment at the University of Toronto. Most of these demonstrators for hire are not even U of T students. Mr. Speaker, hate
That's true.
propaganda,
That's
threats,
very
and
true.
anti-Semitic slogans are being directed at legitimate
We're all being
students.
played for this.
Media
With
state
this.
that the encampment is
We're
funded
all
by
being played.
pro-Hamas sympathizers who are directing a sham protest for a listed terrorist organization. Mr. Speaker, is the government investigating pro-Hamas entities in Canada who are funneling money to support anti-Semitism and illegal protests in Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the local authorities are engaged in their jurisdictions on this matter. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we will always protect the Charter-guaranteed right to freedom of speech and expression, but it must not cross the line into hate and intimidation. Mr. Speaker, at times like this, as a government, we're going to continue to do everything that we can to combat hate and to bring people together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Government is founded on hate.
Question period. We're going to. There are a number of points of order which have been.
Well, what a shame. It ended so soon. But anyway, this is astounding to listen to sometimes. It just amazes me how the Liberals are now latching on to abortion. Where have we heard this one before? Does that not harken back to just about every election in the past 40 years? The Conservatives are somehow plotting to remove abortion. And the Liberals pretend it's somehow a constitutionally secured right, that it's part of the Charter of Rights. Not mentioned. It's not. The only reason we have no abortion law in this country, that we have unrestricted abortion on demand, is because the Supreme Court struck down the existing abortion law in 1988 under Brian Mulroney's administration. And several attempts to replace it with another law were unsuccessful, meaning we have no law for or against abortion in this country. That means it's unregulated. That's the way the Liberals want it, so that there is unrestricted abortion from 0 to 9 months. It is horrendous what exists in Canada. I don't care where you stand on this issue, whether you think abortion is absolutely anathema, where you think it's permissible under certain circumstances, where you think it should be allowed up to 3 months. If you have any common sense or any rationality at all, you know it shouldn't be applied. It shouldn't be allowed up to 9 months. That's infanticide. And that's the policy these cabinet ministers and MPs who stood up today and suggested it's the foundation of freedom and rights in Canada. Abortion is it. That's the essential right in Canada for women. Women don't care about freedom of speech. Women don't care about freedom of religion. Women don't care about freedom of assembly. According to Chrystia Freeland, all they care about is getting an abortion. How idiotic is this kind of philosophy? How stupid are these people? Or how stupid do they think the rest of Canada is to get away with carping like this, with barking out nonsense, with disseminating BS like this that doesn't even make sense? But Chrystia Freeland never does. She is just somebody who says whatever comes into her little head and comes out of her big mouth. That's how she operates, much like Justin Trudeau. They are ultimately nothing but egomaniacs. People whose narcissism is so broad and so incredibly obvious that they can't think of anything but their own self-augmentation. So I am sick to death of liberals pointing their fingers at the conservatives because some of them have the balls to stand up for a principle they believe in that liberals don't happen to approve of. I am sick of listening to liberals say you are not allowed to believe that. And to suggest that all women believe philosophically and ideologically like liberals. You're not allowed to think differently if you're a woman, according to people like Chrystia Freeland. And not only that, she talks about women having control over their own body. Did they have that control during the COVID-19 pandemic? Did they have a right to say no to an invasive vaccine that we know now did nothing to prevent the virus? Did nothing to prevent you from getting COVID? And could potentially be shown to be very harmful in the long run. Did women have a choice about that? If they wanted to work, if they wanted to travel, if they wanted to be treated like normal citizens and not treated like blacks under Jim Crow? Did women have that right in Canada? Or for that matter, did men? No, the Liberals denied that right. And Chrystia Freeland took the bank accounts away from people who dared stand up to her over that right. So don't let the Liberals fool you for a minute. They are full of blather and BS. They are full of themselves. They're not full of any love for liberty. They're not full of any admiration for freedom. They don't espouse anything except pathetic talking points that are nothing but self-aggrandizement for their caucus members, for their cabinet ministers, and for their prime minister, who today is once again doing something else. So this is an outrage. Thanks for watching today. I might be back tomorrow. Friday is sometimes on, sometimes off. Nobody's there. But I tell you, YouTube has been suppressing these broadcasts this week. Then I watch the numbers. As soon as they start to rise, YouTube deletes people watching it. It suppresses the show. So it's very frustrating. But thank you, folks, for watching today. And I will be interviewing Michael Cooper, Member of Parliament from Strathcona, Edmonton, tomorrow. Might put the broadcast up Friday night, probably put it up Saturday. But we're going to be talking to Michael, who I've known for many, many years, about Randy Boissonnault, the Edmonton Liberal MP, who is knee-deep and maybe even armpit deep in scandal right now over his consulting company, over his PR company. It's not clear exactly what he was offering, but Michael has got his finger on this file. And I've always expected and received frank and honest remarks from Michael Cooper. So that should be interesting. I'm going to focus on more interviews next week. And thanks for being a part of this rebellion, because we are here to resolve to resist. Have a look at the store, at the merchandise store, and I encourage you to have a look. We've got some great stuff there. I haven't got the slides up today, but put one of these magnets on your fridge. They're fantastic. We've got the shirts, we've got the hoodies, and we got the coffee cups. So I encourage you to do that. Thanks again for watching, and I will be back soon. God bless you all as we continue to fight Trudeau censorship, YouTube suppression, and for freedom and liberty of the individual in Canada against the power and the aggressive exertions of an all-powerful liberal-ruled state.